data right now, but I'll just use some old data because it'll be there. Okay. So when I look at in Influx, when I look at Data Explorer, and if I just want to go get some data, what was I doing last? Hang on, let me get it. No, way more than the past hour. Let's go with the past 7 days. There should be a bunch of junk in here. No, there isn't even. Let me go the past month. Oh, it's been a while since I pulled anything off my Pi, apparently. Yeah, won't matter. So you can see I've been trying to troubleshoot some people's weather implementations. Therefore, I have weather data. But this works. So some things to look at. And we look at how Influx presents data to us here. Keep in mind, this is a database. Okay, probably these. Let me just go and not look at this as a graph, but let's look at it as a table. And let me not grab that one. Let me just grab this one. Some CPU information, and we'll just bin it down to a couple things. Usage idle, usage user. Let's try that. And submit that. Okay, so I've just dumped the tables out. You can see I've got a list of tables on the left. And this is really small print. I wonder if I can make that bigger. I don't know if I can or not. Let's try this. Oh, it does kind of work. Good. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I just want to look at what one of these lines is here, because this is how it gets described within Thingsboard. Sorry, within Thingsboard, within Influx. Okay, you can see I've got a field equals usage idle measurement. Usage idle measurement is CPU and CPU total and the host name. Okay, so what happens with each one of these, if we go down the list, you'll see that each one is slightly different. So the next field is usage user instead of usage idle. Next one down is back to usage idle, but it's going to have a different host. So what it's got here is it's got a unique tag that is built out of the data that came in. So the data that came in had some information in it about what type of data it is. Specifically, in this case, which host was it, and which set of measurements and which field should it go in. So it's taken that and it's named the entry. Okay, now within that, I might find that I get, like in this case, I've got multiple entries for this particular thing. And if I was to go look, it's probably the timestamp that's different. So this has come in several times over a block of time. These other ones are probably just, I turned it on once and turned it off again. I'm sorry, I've got them all now. I've got more stuff in here now. Okay, this one only has one, for example, which meant I turned it on, it got some information, I was troubleshooting something, I turned it off, and it went away. Okay. So on the left, this is how it comes in, and this is how Influx titles it. So this has been created by Telegraph. So we shipped our data up to Telegraph. Telegraph, and we talked about this idea that Telegraph then takes the data and reformats into something that Influx will understand. In particular, what it's really doing is it's taking that data from, in our case, MQTT, it builds this first part, which is how it's going to name the data piece, and then includes the data pieces, which is, in this case, it's a value and a timestamp and some other bits that is pulled out of the actual line that got processed. Now, this is from the CPU monitoring data on my Telegraph. Okay, so that was in the telegraph.conf file. Let me go back to that. This line right here, inputs.cpu.
Oh.
That says, take the CPU information for this machine, which in this case is the container running Telegraph. and says and show and make it data and send it onwards. So input means here's the data source, and in this case, inputs.cpu is the data source is this box. That contrasts with something like inputs MQTT consumer, where the input is the stuff sent from this guy. I have two outputs. One is I have an outputs.file. So this is actually writing stuff to standard out. Here we go. Standard out. I'm actually, there is stuff happening here, right? You can see that because it's running right now, every once in a while it does dump some stuff out. Oh, hang on, that's not what I want. Let's go here. Is that the one I want? No, not Docker. I wonder which one it is I want. Oh, it's going to output inside the container. That would be harder for me to see. If I was to go and build a console into the container, then I could probably go and get what's getting dumped out to standard out. I'd have to console into the container. The output section here, this is the one, outputs.influxdbv2, says whatever you've got as an input, rewrite it and send it here. Okay, so the bucket it goes in for me is PyData in the ICT organization, and that's really all I've done with that. Okay. There is some stuff happening down here in this section. This is the MQTT section. What that Telegraph is using, it's where am I sending it and what topic. Those two things have to be there. The rest of this is I'm trying to parse through the topic, which is how it breaks out. Like my MQTT stuff comes in. So for example, if from my Pi, I sent temperature and pressure and humidity, something a lot of you are doing. How does it know how to break that out? And that's what this part here is actually this part here is actually accomplishing. Is it's identifying in the JSON file those key value pairs that we've got, and it says that key is going to become a topic thing. Okay, or it's going to become, because it doesn't actually, it's pulling it out of MQTT, that key is going to become a piece of our data. Okay. And then when we move back into Influx, what we would see is the things that it's pulled out are the things that end up showing up when I filter in this measurement piece. All right. So we've got a title that's been made by Telegraph, and then the actual components of the data, of which there's a bunch of bits. In terms of my CPU one, I need to make this a little smaller again. Okay, in terms of the CPU one, it sent me CPU information. Hang on. Sorry, my phone going off. And it's supposed to be on Don't Talk to Me, and it did. Okay. I think you're still hearing me now, right? Good. Nobody's screaming, so I'm assuming so. So in terms of the CPU information, or in terms of whatever other information we've got, Telegraph has set it up in a format that's structured so Influx, when it receives that piece of data, knows, oh, I've got a temperature reading, I've got a pressure reading, I've got a humidity reading, and this is the value associated with it. Yeah, I'm good. I heard screaming. It wasn't me. I think it was me. Unless I've, blacked out for a minute and I'm screaming. But even within the CPU information, you can see that. So example, for the usage idle, it's even got that broken down into a set of sub chunks. The total CPU or the individual, I've got a 6-core machine, cores 0 through 5. Each core has its own value. All right, so that's how the original data arrived from whatever generated it, sent it to Telegraph. Telegraph has parsed it out. And that's the bonus with Telegraph is it has the ability to do this kind of thing and build all these chunks. when we ship it up, that's what we get. When we look at the query, we're saying, I don't just want to dump that mess, like this big table thing at the top. Because this represents basically all my data. Now I filtered down here, but if I just did this, no, I actually have to pick something here for a measurement. So just tell me everything I've done in the last 30 days. Boom. Ooh. Okay. So this is all the data that I've got. It'll be all over the place here because there should be some weather data in there. There should be some CPU data in there. I've got unsupported input type. Some of you have seen that one already. We worked through that. When you bring in the weather data and then you try and do something like graph it, or actually, so what's happening with the data that I'm bringing in is for each one of these fields, there's toggles over here for an aggregate function. If we go and look at my script editor, okay, so now we go through, where do I want to get the data from? So which bucket, which database is it coming from? PyData. What range? My time, and this is just set from the window piece here. And how do I want to filter? So measurement CPU or measurement weather. So those are the two things I've had in the checkboxes here. Measurement CPU or measurement weather. Okay, let me limit it to weather instead. Oh, I'm spinning. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to say weather, which makes it a little simpler. So that's the third line. Okay, right here, that's actually all I need to get the weather data. Let me get this out of here. No, I'm not. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so that's gone. I just blatantly took out the last two lines. Let me submit this. And you'll see that I've limited to weather, but you notice that I still have all my data for weather. I lost the CPU stuff because I untoggled it. Okay, what I took off of this, let me put it back. Is an aggregate function. So take the data and do something with it. And in this case, what it was doing was it was taking a mean. And we see that in my query builder. Go back to the query builder. Wow, I got real slow all of a sudden. And it's on the right-hand side where I've got aggregate function right down here. By default, most of the stuff will do what will do a mean. But in fact, what I want for a lot of my data is I actually want last, which is what's the most recent one? Mm-hmm. Okay, now you notice it actually didn't make any change up here in my table because the table is not impacted by this, but something like a graph is. And obviously I got some value that's really big and a bunch that are really small. Let me I need a different set. I got to figure out which thing is got the big number in it. Let me reset this. Wow, it's just really slow. I've not hit that before. Screaming gophers, screaming goats, all kinds of good things. Okay, I'm back. I hit plus. I don't want that. There we go, my fields. So what are the field lists? So let's just pick a couple of things off here, like temperature. There we go. So now if I submit that, you'll see I get the graph. I seem to have a lot of data points. No, you know what? It's every time. So what it's done is I've managed to get a bunch of discrete pieces in here because I'm looking at this over the last 30 days, right? And it's me trying stuff and turning it off and trying stuff and turning it off. And it's seen those as all different bits. So that's why I've got a ton of lines here. You shouldn't see that with current live data in that sense. Okay, but if we look at the script editor by going to last, let's try something here. I haven't done this before. Go back to mean and submit that. Okay, so right now with that particular one, it's making no difference to my graph. I know that there were things that threw an error if you tried to average them and they weren't numerical. So I think one of the things in weather is there's a field for okay, it wants to describe my manual changes. Condition description, that was it. Okay, if that's set for mean, this should, yeah. So that's the one that throws an error because it's a string and you can't average a string. If I go to last, it fits it, it fixes it. Okay, so just, and I'm still trying to graph it. That's just a dumb idea. Don't graph your textual data. There we go. It works better as a thing. So my value here is light rain. You guys are, wonder when this was. April 6th. A couple days ago. All right, so in terms of the basic, let's filter the data. We can do this. All right, and that's the part we walked through before. You want to set a custom time range, you can do that in here. So Ryan notes, I ran into problems when changing the time range. You mean like in here or somewhere else? Oh, I'm not scrolling. That's why. There we go. Okay. Let's see what I can do. So I've asked for the last 30 days. That's more time than I want. And we saw I don't have 30 days back, but I have, come on, go to the top, hit custom time range. All right, so when do I want to start? Start on the 19th. Go to the 21st. Start on the 19th. Oh, March 19th. No, it's not. Yeah, okay. And then end on the 26th. Let's look at that week. Apply time range. I should have looked at when I actually had data from. Oh. Okay, well, I'm not throwing any data right now, but I can start that up. Okay, I'll have a look at that. Not sure why that would be the case. All right, so in terms of filtering, we've got this ability to filter. I won't. You do also have the ability to group in here, which doesn't make sense within our current setup because most of us don't have things that would make sense to group. But for example, let's say you had a building with 10 sensors in it, different spots in the building, and you wanted to present them as a unified view. Well, then you could in fact group them according to which building they're in and move that as a block of data around. So that's a possibility here with this group function. Like I said, it just, with what we've got, it doesn't make a lot of sense to group stuff. Well, maybe, I wonder if it does. Try this. Might totally break it. Yeah. We haven't set up our data to be particularly groupable. And without mucking around with it a little more, I'm not going to get something out of that. Now, the next piece that takes this up a new level, and this is something we haven't talked about at all. And part of the reason for that was because in terms of, one of the things I set out with the initial problem set was within all of this, there's all these different spots that you can do things. And we don't have time for you to do things in all of them. So one of the spots that you could do things was you could work with doing some data work in Influx. If you chose to do that, then this is the spot you would have landed, which is down in transformations. Okay, which is I'm into working on the query, and you notice my right-hand side box has changed where I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I can do. Okay, my guess is, again, for most of us, this is a huge list and not really something we want to work with a lot, right? But what you would have figured out very quickly is there's a couple of functions in here that are ones that get used an awful lot. The first of these is map. Okay, and a map function takes values that are already in your data set and says, let's do something to one or some of them and add a new value to the data set. So for example, thinking back to some of the things we had done already, if I was receiving temperature in Celsius and wanted to add Fahrenheit to my table, I could do a map that reads in the Celsius temperature, does the math, and adds a new data element to each row. So if I've got, the temperature in Kelowna at this time was this in Celsius, I could add a new entry in that row that says, and it's also this in Fahrenheit. So I can do the work right here. Or I could do something like, if this is the reading I got from my Pi, what adjustment am I using to make it say, well, probably the room temperature is about this then, knowing that my Pi is reading high because the heat sensor is located next to the CPU. But if I can figure out about what that usually is off by, then I can, make the entry right in here and then have that happen. So using a map function lets me take any value I've got and work with it, or any set of values I've got. So I can take things like with a map, I can do what we did with one of the exercises, the things board, remember, was to get the previous temperature and the current temperature from a sensor and figure out the delta between them. That was one of the practice exercises, tutorials that we did with things board in the rule engine. Okay, you can do the same thing here, where I can take the previous value and the current value and calculate the delta between them and have that entered in as a piece of data into my table, which once I've entered it, once I've got it made, then it becomes available for things like Grafana to go ahead and present and graph. All right. So when we talk about building queries, we've got the simple part, which is just going back to here and playing around with taking all of my big set of data and applying filters to it to get down to which thing specifically do I actually want to see. Okay, if I need to do some transforms on it, then I'm going to look at how do I do a map. Map is probably the one I want to look at. Okay, if that's part of what you're trying to do, and I've talked to a couple of people and shared some links with it, that I've got those, and let me know, and we can walk through what that looks like. Once you see a couple examples, building a map for a simple calculation is not particularly difficult. The syntax you saw it here is really, if you've not had any explanation on it or looked at it with any intent, it looks like, that makes no sense. So, and from a programming perspective, it doesn't make what they've written there doesn't make a ton of sense. Again, what they're doing is they're manipulating a database. And if you live in database land, it probably makes a little more sense as to what they're trying to do with the syntax there. But most of you have not ever worked in database land. And therefore, when you see that, you just look at it and go, I'm going to do something else. I don't know if that helped or not. It takes a certain mindset. It's like being an accountant. Either it's you or it's not. If it's not, it's really not. But if it is, It's you know, pig in the mud type land. Yeah. Just roll around in it. So in terms of the time thing, Ryan, send me, if you've got some specific things that happen, you could tell me what your process is. I'll take a run at it and see if I get the same results in terms of the same problem or the same hang up happening. And we'll go from there. All right. So again, grand hope that some of this made a little more sense than it did the first time we did it, because the first time we did it, you'd never seen it before. Most of you have now worked with this at least a little bit to try and get something out of Influx. Change my time here. There we go. And just do this one. Get myself a number. Just let me graph that. Well, we could do all kinds of things. Yeah, it doesn't make a good heat map. So yeah, we get that kind of thing. I can then, you can see I've got 3 hosts here, so I could look at just one of them.
Oh, those are the host numbers.
That line.
Oh.
Change it to a different one. That line. Change it to a different one. There's a dot there somewhere, I'm sure. Host means so what's happened is, yeah, I've generated data from possibly a real pi, a physical pi, and some virtual pies. So what happens is when this lands at Influx, it actually is tagged with which machine generated this stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, it's actually, those are actually separate hosts. Now I have to look at what that actually is. 3E, 9E. It might be a MAC address. Yeah. Not big enough for, is it big enough for a MAC address? Or some parse thereof. Somehow it's identified the machine anyway. A delve through the documentation would probably help me figure out what that is. And it's not, so now, this value that's showing up here for host is not a influx of it value. It's been provided to it by Telegraph. And Telegraph got it from whoever gave it data. Okay. So now I know that with our MQTT stuff, I get a host value out of my MQTT data. So yet my originating JSON doesn't have anything about what host is it in it, which tells me that Telegraph has done something with the source IP, would be my guess, or source MAC, to generate a value for who is this. It better be MAC, actually. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Because if they're coming from the same network, they've gone through a NAT. Boy, yeah, I'm not sure what it's done. Yeah, I'm thinking it is, but no, that's still good. Yeah, okay. So what'll happen is, yeah, the source MAC will stay the same. The source IP, if you run it through a NAT, the source IP changes, but the MAC will stay good. Right. Yeah. So it's got to be MAC related, which again, in theory, should be globally unique. So if you don't provide a name, and you certainly could, I mean, there's nothing stops us from like in our Python file, putting in another key value pair, which is name, and giving it a value. Right. And then when it shows up here, it comes up that way and I can filter against that. So this has been auto-generated by the process. So there is a host value in there. But I could just as easily use my own naming convention and it would show up just like any other thing does. And I could filter against it. Anybody have anything else on either this or somewhere else in the mix they want to go back through? Seeing questions, that's fine. You don't need to. Nothing wrong with that. What about stacking dashboards in Grafana? What about it? Are you saying, how on earth do you do it? Is that what you're asking? It is actually quite easy because Grafana has a piece that's built in for doing exactly that. If you remember, we did the one with the weather station where it had little drop downs. And so there is a piece within Grafana that lets you build the drop down. It's built in. What are the things you want? Great, I'll build a drop down for that, and we'll put it onto your dashboard. So when you build a dashboard, there are several in Grafana. There's several things you can add to the dashboard. It's not just let's add graphs. I don't know if I can show this or not. All right, let me go. Okay, let me get something on there. Yeah, that'll be fine. I can even find it. I'm not going to find it quickly here, but I did look at this when he did it. When I saw that dashboard, I went and looked it up. And, okay, well it was quite easy to do. Let's put it that way, because it's a functionality that's built into Grafana to make it happen. Use Telegraph to receive data from a non-MQTT source and deliver it to InfluxDB for presented dashboard. Oh, yeah, it was one of the things that you could look at doing. So, for example, right now, we're sending data from our Pi using MQTT to Telegraph. Okay, so I've had people look at, well, what are other places we can get data from? So, for example, Telegraph can actually query OpenWeather itself. It doesn't need you to use a Pi to do it. Okay, not surprisingly, if it makes the query directly, it doesn't come through MQTT. I've got somebody who's been working on SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol, saying because devices will talk that. They will happily send information. So Telegraph can receive information as SNMP from a device directly. Okay, and because of how SNMP works, if you tried to run it to MQTT, you've got to put in a bridge, a shim of some sort.
Hello?
Because the SNMP tool, which is usually pretty low end, would need to, but can ship to an IP address. So it can ship directly to Telegraph easily. If you needed to convert it to MQTT first, then you'd need something else running. So it really depends on your use case. But let's say Simple Network Management Protocol, you wanted to gather data from your switch, Cisco switch.
I don't know. Burger
Can you run your own software on the Cisco switch? You cannot.
Oh, you're going to both. Okay,
So what that means is the switch happily will generate SNMP data, and it will happily send it to whoever you tell it to.
Yeah, and then you can.
So if I tell it to send it to Telegraph,
like,
Telegraph can receive it
I won't
as SNMP data and reformat it so that influx so it can be put into influx.
Do you think it would be too late to go for a walk after?
Not through influx. Well, actually, influx can do it there too, I think. Although I think it probably defaults down to pushing it into Telegraph everywhere. But yeah, you're adding a different section to the telegraph.conf. So let me pull mine up again and share it. Oh, in fact, I've got it there. Let me share this. Your screen, this one. All right. So we can see in my, this is my telegraph.conf file. I've got two places that I'm outputting. I'm sending stuff to influx. I'm sending stuff to standard out, which is the console. My inputs, the ones I've got active right now, I'm pulling CPU information. Also, what the file I provided you, I said, hey, you can also get system information. You can also get memory information. Just uncomment these and you'll get stuff. Okay, we've said, hey, here's how you get stuff from MQTT, and that was this block. Okay, so again, that was provided to you. Here's a block to get stuff from Open Weather Map. So this is Telegraph is going to, every 10 minutes, is going to go pull some data from Open Weather Map about, my city code here is Kelowna. Okay, so it'll pull the data and it'll send it on. So that's a new input section inside of Telegraph. So this is Telegraph now receiving stuff that's not MQTT. And it outputs to influx. So I've got an input from Open Weather Map and an output to influx. So my weather data does land there. We were working with some weather data a minute ago. Actually, this has been running for a bit. I wonder if I've got anything in. Well, I've got CPU data since we were on here. Do I have any weather data? All that. Put it in a table. The past hour, do I have weather data? All right. I got ding dong here doing mean. There we go. Submit that. Yes. So I've gathered data in the last hour on different bits of stuff. Humidity is 33%. Feels like 12.66. Overcast, cloudy. That kind of stuff. So I am, in fact, pulling information. And that is this block right here doing it. And you can see if you've worked with this, some of you have, there's nothing fancy here. I've got my app ID for Open Weather, which city. Again, I could have more than one. What language? Which pieces do I want it to fetch? I've just asked for weather and forecast. There's a lot of other different things you can push in here. And this is one of the areas where if you pay for Open Weather Map, there's more things you can add into this section, more different pieces of data you can get. What's the base URL? So where do I get it from? How long do I wait before I give up? What units do I want? And how often should I go query to see if it's changed? There's other things you could add into this. So that's where I would look up, okay, if I need to know what's going on with that, then okay, and I'm looking at Telegraph Open Weather API. And probably, well, let's have a look. First hit on here is GitHub, which is where the Telegraph stuff is. All right, so here they go through. Here's my things that I can do. So the metrics, what tags and what fields am I getting? Example output, what does it look like? That seems pretty straightforward right there, yeah. Okay, so for SNMP, there should just be one plugin that you need. There are some other issues around SNMP for it to work. Getting SNMP data to Telegraph is easy. Getting it to understand it is a little bit more work. Let me go back here. Now let me see if I can find a good example. Here we go. So this is a sample of a Telegraph chunk for doing SNMP. The agents are, well, who should we expect SNMP information from? So we're looking at two different devices. Okay, this is SNMP information to set up. And then this is where it gets a little convoluted because of how it organizes things called fields and table fields. And that's an SNMP thing. And you've got to be able to sort through that. So you got to look at how is the underlying definition built. And this is where it gets a little more complicated. But what it's going to do is it's going to say, tell me your host name. Okay, and then go get this information, which is the interface table. And then what is this going to do? And the name of the interface. Okay, so this is gonna his problem is he's pulling all the data about the ports and not just the pieces he wants. So he's asked. This is on Influx as forums, but this is the kind of idea. This is what it looks like to do that. So he's asking for, in fact, he's pulling three pieces of information. In this case, he is in fact using pieces of these pulled in the next piece, into the next piece. So there we go. I see we're out of time, so I'm going to let you go. And we'll have a quiz on Thursday, and away we go. All right. Somebody from the college really, really wants to get a hold of me. I wonder who it is. 2 to 3 or 2 to 4 for the quiz. In terms of hard content, 2 and 3 will be the core of it. There'll probably be opportunity for you to work in stuff from 1 and 4, but it wouldn't be necessary. That makes sense. So again, when you're doing a written answer, there'll probably be some opportunity that if you've got stuff from there that you understand and can bring to bear, it will fit, but wouldn't be a requirement of it. Okay, and thank you, Thomas. I will try that shortly. And somebody had asked at the start, could we talk about something after?